Welcome back to the Life Story 999, the channel that brings you the most heartwarming, life-changing stories that reflect the power of family, love, and justice. Today, we have a story of a single mom named Emily who was pulled into court for a minor traffic violation, but things took an unexpected twist when her 5-year-old son, Zach, stole the show in front of the judge. Little did they know, this day in court would become a moment of inspiration not only for Emily and Zach, but also for everyone witnessing it. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's dive in. Emily Wallace was feeling a mix of nervousness and exhaustion as she entered the courthouse. It wasn't her first time dealing with a traffic ticket, but bringing all her children with her was a completely new experience. As a single mom of 5, ranging from a toddler to an energetic kindergartner, she didn't have much choice. Today, they were all along for the ride, whether she liked it or not. 5-year-old Zach, in particular, was thrilled. He had never been to court before, and to him, it was an adventure. The courthouse was a place of solemnity, with its high ceilings and polished wooden benches. Emily couldn't help but feel overwhelmed as she walked in. The atmosphere was heavy, a reminder of how serious this was supposed to be. As they shuffled into the courtroom, she made sure to quiet her children, who were all abuzz with excitement, especially Zach, who was craning his neck to take in everything. He had so many questions, and she kept whispering, "Shoo, Zach, not now." Emily approached the stand, trying to maintain her composure. Judge Harper, a man in his late 50s with a reputation for being fair but firm, sat at the bench. He wore a stern expression that, from what she'd heard, often softened as the cases proceeded. He was known for his fairness, but also for a sense of humor that could break the tension. Emily could only hope that today he was in a good mood. As she stood before him, she could feel her children fidgeting behind her. Zach, ever the curious one, was whispering to his siblings, pointing at the judge's gavel. Judge Harper looked up from his paperwork, his eyes falling on the little cluster of children seated beside their weary mother. He paused, and Emily braced herself, unsure of what he would say. Then, to her surprise, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He leaned into the microphone and said, "Mrs. Wallace, are these your children? Or did you rent them from a daycare for moral support?" His voice carried a warmth that instantly lightened the mood. The entire courtroom burst into gentle laughter, and Emily couldn't help but smile, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "They're all mine, Your Honor," she replied, her voice filled with a mix of pride and exhaustion. Judge Harper nodded thoughtfully, his gaze shifting to Zach, who had taken off his little hat and was nervously twirling it in his hands. "Young man, what's your name?" he asked, his tone gentler now. Zach's eyes widened, and he hesitated for a moment before replying, "Zach, sir." His voice was barely above a whisper. Judge Harper smiled warmly. "Zach, how would you like to help me with your mom's case today?" He motioned for Zach to come forward, and the boy's eyes grew as wide as saucers. Emily gave him an encouraging nudge, and Zach slowly slid off his seat, making his way hesitantly to the front. The bailiff, a tall man with a kind smile, helped Zach up the steps to stand beside Judge Harper. The judge leaned down to Zach's level, looking him right in the eye. "Do you think your mom was speeding on purpose? Or maybe she just made a little mistake?" he asked, his voice conspiratorial as if he was sharing a secret. Zach looked back at his mom, then up at Judge Harper. He bit his lip for a moment before answering, "A little mistake, sir. My mom is a good driver." His honesty and sincerity drew a collective awe from those seated in the courtroom. Judge Harper nodded gravely, his eyes twinkling. "Well, Zach, I appreciate your honesty. Do you think we should fine your mom a lot of money, or should we just let her go with a warning this time?" Zach thought about it, then shook his head seriously. "Maybe just a warning. She's been really tired because she takes care of all of us," he said, his small voice echoing in the quiet room. The judge paused, visibly moved by the boy's candidness. He looked at Emily, who was fighting back tears. She had faced so many challenges, but this moment, seeing her son stand up for her, unafraid, made all of the struggles worthwhile. Judge Harper cleared his throat, tapping his gavel lightly. "Well, young man, you've made a pretty strong case on your mom's behalf. I think we'll go with your recommendation." Case dismissed. He handed the gavel to Zach. Would you like to do the honors? Zach's eyes sparkled as he took the gavel. He looked at his mom, then at Judge Harper, and banged it down with as much authority as his little arm could muster. Case dismissed, he declared, his voice full of pride. The courtroom erupted in applause, and Judge Harper patted Zach on the back. Good job, young man. You might have a future in law, he said with a wink. Emily felt her heart swell with pride as she gathered her children. This day, which had started with so much worry, had turned into something beautiful, a moment that showed her the strength and love of her family, and a reminder that even in the toughest situations, there could be light. Judge Harper leaned down, whispering to Zach, "Do you think your mom was speeding on purpose? Or maybe she just made a little mistake?" Zach looked thoughtful, his small brows furrowing as he considered the question. After a moment, he replied earnestly, "A little mistake, sir. My mom is a good driver." His voice was quiet, but his sincerity resonated in the hushed courtroom, and a wave of murmurs spread through the onlookers. Judge Harper smiled warmly, nodding. "Well, I like honesty, Zach." He straightened up slightly and addressed the young boy again. "Do you think we should fine your mom a lot of money? Or maybe just let her go with a warning?" His eyes twinkled, and it was clear that he enjoyed the unique turn this case had taken. Zach pursed his lips in thought, his gaze darting back to his mother, who was watching him with a mixture of pride and nervousness. He nodded solemnly. "Maybe just a warning. She's been very tired lately taking care of all of us," he explained, his words causing a ripple of sympathetic smiles among the crowd. Judge Harper paused, visibly moved by Zach's innocent honesty and the love that was apparent in every word. The judge took a deep breath and turned to Emily. "Mrs. Wallace, I think you've got yourself a pretty impressive lawyer here. Zach has made a compelling case on your behalf," he said, his tone both respectful and lighthearted. The courtroom erupted in gentle laughter, and Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. Life had thrown so many challenges her way, but standing there, seeing her young son advocating for her, filled her heart with a pride she couldn't describe. It was moments like these that made every sleepless night, every struggle, worth it. Judge Harper tapped the gavel lightly on the bench. "All right, Zach, here's what we're going to do," he announced, looking at the boy beside him. "I'm going to dismiss your mom's case today, but I need you to promise me something. You need to remind her to always drive safely, okay? Can you do that for me?" Zach, standing as straight as his small frame would allow, saluted Judge Harper in a gesture that was both serious and utterly endearing. "Yes, sir, I promise," he declared with conviction. The room filled with chuckles and applause, and even Judge Harper couldn't suppress his grin. Judge Harper then handed the gavel to Zach. "How about you help me finish this case? You get to bang the gavel and say case dismissed," he offered. Zach's eyes widened, his face lighting up with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. He took the gavel from the judge, his fingers barely able to wrap around it fully. He glanced at his mom, who nodded at him with an encouraging smile. Then, with all the strength in his little arm, Zach brought the gavel down, his voice ringing out confidently, "Case dismissed." The sharp crack of the gavel echoed throughout the courtroom, followed by an eruption of cheers and applause. People rose to their feet, clapping for the little boy who had just stolen everyone's hearts. Emily stood there, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her heart full of pride and love for her brave little boy. Judge Harper leaned down to Zach once more, his expression kind and filled with admiration. "You did an excellent job today, Zach. I think you might just have a future in law if you keep this up," he said with a wink. Zach looked up at the judge, his face beaming. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said politely, then quickly turned and ran back to his mother, who knelt down to scoop him into a tight hug. "You were amazing, sweetheart," Emily whispered, her voice trembling as she held him close. "Thank you for standing up for me." Zach pulled back, his eyes wide with innocence. "That's what family does, right, Mom? We help each other," he said matter-of-factly. Emily's heart swelled at his words, and she nodded, brushing a hand through his unruly hair. "That's right, baby. We always help each other." As they began to gather their things, Judge Harper called out again, "Mrs. Wallace, Zach? Just one more moment, please." Emily paused, turning back to see the judge stepping down from his bench, walking toward them. The judge knelt down to Zach's level, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You know, Zach," he began, his voice softer now, "what you did today wasn't just about helping your mom. You reminded all of us here that sometimes we need to look beyond the rules and see the person standing in front of us. You reminded me why I became a judge in the first place." Zach listened intently, his young mind processing the weight of the judge's words. "Does that mean I did good?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. Judge Harper smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You did more than good, Zach. You reminded all of us to have a little more heart. That's something not many people can do." He patted Zach's shoulder before standing back up. Turning to Emily, the judge continued, "You have a wonderful son, Mrs. Wallace. You're doing an incredible job. Keep at it." His words were genuine, and Emily felt their impact deep in her core. She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Your Honor," she managed to say, her voice thick. "For everything." Judge Harper gave them both a final nod before returning to his bench, and with that, Emily and her children made their way out of the courtroom. As they walked through the heavy double doors, Zach still holding tightly onto his mother's hand, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. The day had started with anxiety and uncertainty, but it had transformed into something beautiful, a reminder of the power of love, family, and the courage to speak up. Emily glanced down at Zach, who was now animatedly recounting his adventure to his siblings, his face flushed with excitement. She smiled, knowing that this day would be one they would remember forever. The strength they had shown in that courtroom, the courage of a little boy to stand up for his mother, was a testament to the resilience that ran through their family. And for Emily, that was more valuable than anything else in the world. It was a moment that had changed them both, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As Emily gathered her children to leave, Judge Harper called out, "Emily, can I have a word with you? Bring Zach too." Emily nodded, her heart skipping a beat, the uncertainty making her pulse quicken. What could he want to talk about? She ushered her children toward the benches and took Zach by the hand, approaching Judge Harper with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Judge Harper stepped down from the bench, his robe swishing as he made his way toward them on the courtroom floor. He knelt down to Zach's level, a warm smile spreading across his face as he looked into the boy's bright, eager eyes. "Zach," he began, his voice soft yet filled with admiration, "you did something very special today. Do you know what that was?" Zach blinked, his small brow furrowing in confusion. He shook his head slowly, his gaze never leaving the judge's. Judge Harper reached out, placing a gentle hand on Zach's shoulder. "You spoke up for someone you love," he said, his eyes sincere. "Not everyone can do that, especially not in front of so many people. That takes real courage." He paused, letting his words sink in, watching the boy's face for a reaction. Zach seemed to process this, a shy smile tugging at his lips as he glanced back at his mother. Emily felt her eyes sting with tears, her heart swelling with pride. She had always known her son was brave, but hearing it from a judge, someone with such authority, made her realize just how remarkable Zach truly was. Judge Harper then turned his attention to Emily, standing up to address her directly. "You know," he said, his expression softening, "I have 5 kids myself. They're all grown now, but I remember how challenging it was when they were young. I remember the sleepless nights, the constant worries, and the feeling that no matter how much you do, it never feels like enough." He paused, his gaze meeting hers. "You're doing an incredible job, Emily. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Emily swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it difficult to speak. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper as she replied, "Thank you, Your Honor. It means a lot." The sincerity in his words touched her deeply, filling a part of her that had long been neglected, a part that needed validation, that needed someone to see her struggle and acknowledge it. Judge Harper smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He turned back to Zach, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "And you, young man, you keep being brave. The world needs more people like you. People who aren't afraid to stand up for what's right and to support those they love." Zach's smile widened, his chest puffing out slightly with pride. "I will, sir," he said earnestly, his voice carrying a confidence that belied his young age. Judge Harper nodded, stepping back and straightening up. "Good," he said. "I'm counting on you, Zach. You're going to do great things." He gave Emily one last encouraging look before returning to the bench. As Emily and Zach turned to leave, Emily felt something shift within her, a renewed sense of hope and strength that she hadn't realized she needed. The past few years had been difficult, filled with hardships that had tested her resilience. But today had been different. Today, she had seen her son stand up for her, and she had seen the respect in Judge Harper's eyes. Respect for her and for her family. Walking beside her, Zach seemed to carry himself with a newfound confidence. His little chest was puffed out, his chin held high. He looked up at his mother, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, did you hear that? Judge Harper said I was brave," he exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder. Emily smiled down at him, her heart swelling with love. "I heard, sweetheart, and he's right. You are the bravest boy I know." She squeezed his hand, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Zach beamed, his steps turning into a skip as they walked out of the courthouse. He looked up at the sky, his eyes wide with wonder, as if the world had suddenly grown bigger, full of new possibilities. "Do you think I could be a judge one day, Mom?" he asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and excitement. Emily's heart warmed at the question. She knelt down, meeting his gaze. "You can be anything you want to be, Zach," she said, her voice unwavering. "If you want to be a judge, then one day you will be. You have the heart for it, and that's the most important part." Zach nodded, his face serious as he considered her words. "I think I want to help people, like Judge Harper," he said after a moment, his eyes shining with determination. "I want to make sure everyone gets treated fairly." Emily felt tears prick her eyes once again, but this time they were tears of pride. She reached out, pulling Zach into a hug. "I know you will, sweetheart," she whispered. "You already do." As they walked toward their car, Emily felt lighter than she had in a long time. Today had been more than just a dismissed ticket. It had been a reminder of the strength of her family, of the love that bound them together, and of the bright future that lay ahead for her children, especially for Zach, her brave little boy who had stood up for her when she needed it most. The courthouse doors closed behind them, but the lessons of the day lingered. Emily knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together with courage, love, and the unshakable belief that they could overcome anything. And as she watched Zach skip ahead, his laughter echoing in the crisp afternoon air, she knew that they were going to be just fine. 2 weeks later, Emily was going about her day, juggling chores and trying to keep up with her 5 lively children, when there was a knock at the door. Startled, she wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to answer it. Standing there was a man in a suit, holding a small package in his hands. "Mrs. Wallace?" the man asked, his face warm with a friendly smile. "Yes, that's me," Emily replied, a bit confused but curious. The man nodded and held out the package. "This is for you, from Judge Harper." Emily blinked in surprise. From Judge Harper? She took the package, her curiosity piqued. She thanked the man, who tipped his hat and turned to leave. Emily closed the door behind her, her mind racing. What could the judge possibly be sending her? She moved to the kitchen, setting the package down on the table. The children were busy playing in the living room, their laughter drifting through the house. She carefully opened the package, revealing a handwritten letter resting on top of something wrapped in tissue paper. With a gentle touch, she unfolded the tissue to find a small wooden gavel, beautifully polished, with Zach's name engraved on it. Her breath caught in her throat, and she picked up the letter, her hands trembling slightly as she read. "Dear Emily and Zach, I wanted to thank you both for reminding me why I do this job. Zach, you are a true hero, and I hope this gavel will remind you to always stand up for what is right. Emily, you are stronger than you know, and your children are incredibly lucky to have you. All the best, Judge Logan Harper." Emily felt her heart swell, her eyes blurring with tears. She looked at the gavel, running her fingers over Zach's name, the words of the letter echoing in her mind. It wasn't just a token. It was a reminder of that day in the courtroom, of her son's courage, and of the kindness they had received from a stranger who had become an unexpected ally. She called out to Zach, her voice shaky. "Zach, sweetheart, come here. I have something to show you." Zach came bounding into the kitchen, his eyes widening as he saw the small gavel in his mother's hands. "What's that, Mom?" he asked, curiosity lighting up his face. Emily knelt down, holding out the gavel for him to see. "This is for you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's from Judge Harper. He thinks you're a hero, Zach. He wanted you to have this." Zach's eyes grew wide, and his face broke into a grin so wide it made Emily's heart melt. He took the gavel from her hands, turning it over and looking at his name engraved on the side. "Is this really for me?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "Yes, it is," Emily said, smiling through her tears. "Because you were brave, and you stood up for what's right. Judge Harper wanted you to remember that." Zach beamed, his eyes shining with pride. Without missing a beat, he turned and ran into the living room, his voice ringing out with excitement. "Look, everyone, I'm a real judge now," he shouted, waving the gavel in the air. His siblings gathered around, their faces filled with awe as they admired the gift. Emily stood in the doorway, watching her children with her heart full. For the first time in a long while, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The past few years had been filled with challenges, some of them almost too much to bear. But this moment, watching Zach proudly show off his gavel, filled her with hope. It wasn't just a piece of wood. It was a symbol of the courage that her son had shown and the validation they had both received. It was a reminder that, despite the struggles, there were good people in the world who saw them, who understood, and who cared. As she watched Zach, his laughter echoing through the house, Emily knew deep down that everything was going to be okay. Life still had its challenges, and she would face them as they came. But she had her children, their love, and moments like these that made it all worthwhile. She smiled, wiping her tears away, and whispered to herself, "We're going to be just fine." And in that moment, she believed it with all her heart. Emily and Zach's day in court was more than just a dismissed traffic ticket. It was a lesson in courage, love, and the power of family. Zach showed everyone that even the smallest voices could make a big difference, and Judge Harper reminded Emily that there are people in the world who see and appreciate the struggles of others. The engraved gavel became a symbol in their household, a reminder of that day when Zach stood up for his mom and how they both found strength they didn't know they had. It wasn't just a funny story to tell at family gatherings. It was a defining moment, one that brought them closer as a family and gave them hope for the future. In life, we all face challenges that can sometimes feel overwhelming. But as Zach demonstrated, it's not the size of the challenge that matters, but how we face it. With love, honesty, and a little bit of courage, we can overcome even the toughest of situations. Thank you for joining us on Life Story 999 for this heartfelt journey. We hope Emily and Zach's story touched your heart as it did ours. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more uplifting content. And remember, no matter how small you may feel, your voice matters. Be like Zach. Stand up for what's right, support those you love, and never be afraid to speak up. See you in the next story.